guys ever wonder how Dan Bilzerian pays for his lifestyle? The private jet, yacht, parties, mansions, and more.
He would have just stayed in jail. Like, he would have preferred to just stay in jail for 10 years if it meant not giving them $50.
Dan Bilzerian is one of the biggest frauds on social media, and here's how he lied about being a Navy SEAL.
Then the fund at one point, you said it was worth like $96 million, the investments in it, and then when you sell it 2019, 2020-ish, the investments are worth only $1.5 million or a little under. What happened?
Dan Bilzerian, once the untouchable Instagram king, is watching his empire collapse in real time. The beard, the cigars, the women, the mansions, it was all crafted to make him untouchable. He built his fame on yacht parties, exotic cars, an arsenal of weapons, and a constant rotation of models. It was the ultimate fantasy for millions of men online. But that's not all. Behind the smoke and champagne, the cracks were already spidering through his perfect image, and they were about to explode wide open.
This is because before Dan entered the world of poker and Instagram, he was in the Navy and tried becoming a Navy SEAL. And he's for years made this claim that he was going to be a Navy SEAL but got kicked out 2 days before graduation. Becoming a SEAL is one of the toughest things a person can do with a 94% rejection rate. But while many people don't make it through their training, very few, if any, people are ever rejected 2 days before graduation. And his claim for getting kicked out was very bizarre, where he said it was due to mishandling of a firearm at a range. Which, unless his teacher was Alec Baldwin, I don't think there was anything he could do to make that happen. And his stories about Navy SEAL training make even less sense when you look into it, where he said he did the training while having 2 broken legs for a year. So that's quite literally impossible, where he'd have to both run, swim, and do many other workouts with 2 broken legs. And the funniest thing is he tried to be a war movie actor, paying $1 million to get a 6-minute role in the movie Lone Survivor. But he sued them after they only gave him 1 minute of screen time because they said his acting was so bad they couldn't put it in. So he couldn't even pass as a Navy SEAL actor, his story makes no sense, and he's a clear fraud.
Despite firing off a defiant post on X to prove he was still on top, the numbers told a brutal truth. In just one day, March 31st, 2024, 5,419 people hit unfollow. Over the next 6 months, more than 60,000 disappeared. It gets worse. That exodus sent Ignite's stock price into a death spiral, forcing him to rip it off the exchange completely. And now, the self-proclaimed ultimate winner is scrambling for relevance. This next part, straight up wild. Dan's pivoting hard, copying Andrew Tate's playbook, and trying to cash in on alpha self-help books and men's courses under the Sigma Society brand. But the desperation is oozing through every move, and the downfall is just getting started. But the worst was yet to come, and it hit like a wrecking ball. The gleaming supercars and wild mansion parties. Here's where the mask falls off. They were staged, nothing more than props in a digital fantasy. And then the real trouble stepped in. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission launched a full investigation into his finances. It spirals from here.
Explain why your dad once wouldn't talk to you for months.
Well, when I was in the military, I had to sign off a third of my trust fund to get him out of jail, because they had him in contempt of court for like 9 or 10 months. And they're doing this thing called diesel therapy, where they're like sending him from maximum security prison to maximum security prison. He felt like they had totally f***ed him over, which according to his accounts, they really had. And so, yeah, they basically came to me and they said, if you sign over a third of your trust fund, we'll let him out. Like, they weren't supposed to be able to get a trust fund that you put to your sons, because that's like not money that's his anymore. So he was not happy about it.
In 2024, the hypocrisy hit its peak when Dan filed a lawsuit against his own father, the man he'd sworn for years never funded him. Dan accused Paul Bilzerian and other shareholders of scheming to shove him out of Ignite, the very company built on his face and persona. And it gets even messier. This is the same Dan Bilzerian who was expelled from high school for bringing a gun to campus, who had a short-lived Navy stint, and who once lived a life most could only dream about. Now, he was the internet's favorite punching bag, stripped bare as a fraud and con artist. But then everything changed. On July 20th, 2018, just months after Ignite launched, Dan quietly fired company president Curtis Heffernan, a seasoned former Procter & Gamble exec. He probably thought it would bury any whispers of trouble. Instead, Heffernan came back swinging, hitting him with a wrongful termination lawsuit that promised to drag every dirty secret into the light. And with that lawsuit, the real chaos starts here. Heffernan went for the jugular, exposing that $65 million mansion Dan bragged about owning was nothing more than a $200,000 a month rental, a Hollywood set piece for Instagram fantasies. And once that truth landed, the empire's foundation began to crumble for good.
So apparently, according to Forbes, a former Ignite employee ratted him out. Here's what he said. As you can see right here, basically Ignite pays for everything. So whatever they wanted to use it under company expenses, he would just wrap it with the logo. Do you guys think Ignite is done for good, or they'll bounce back?
Brace yourself for this one, because once this detail hit the court records, the drama only gets deeper. In a single stroke, the illusion disintegrated. The man who built his entire persona on owning the unattainable was suddenly outed as nothing more than a tenant playing dress-up as a tycoon. And like a row of dominoes, once the first lie toppled, the rest of his image was bound to come crashing down. But that's not all. What sent the internet into hysterics wasn't just the fake mansion, it was the ridiculous timing. Just 1 week before the truth exploded, Dan had strutted Kevin O'Leary, the famed Shark Tank investor, through those rented halls, bragging about his $65 million palace. He sold the fantasy right to Kevin's face, oozing high roller confidence. And then came the bombshell. Mid-tour, Kevin casually asked a standard business question. What kind of tax deductions did he get on the purchase? Dan's swagger evaporated instantly. His eyes darted, his expression tightened, and the silence said more than words ever could. Instead of answering, he muttered a flimsy quip and scrambled to change the subject. Here's where the truth hits hard. That awkward exchange, caught on camera, became the perfect symbol of Dan's empire. All flash on the surface, nothing underneath. And once the world learned the mansion was rented, every frame of that clip went from impressive to laughable overnight. The glamorous entourage of friends, models, and admirers, this is where it all falls apart. They weren't loyal followers. They were paid actors in his never-ending photo shoot. Court filings revealed Dan shelled out $26,000 just to populate his circle for Instagram, logging it under image promotion. Every champagne pop, every staged bikini shot, every fake smile, all part of a purchased illusion. But then everything changed. When Ignite's expense reports went public, the fantasy disintegrated even further. The numbers were staggering. Nearly $900,000 burned to bankroll Dan's personal lifestyle. His move? Slapped the Ignite logo on everything authorized, from cars to liquor bottles, pretending it was all business promotion. Clever? Maybe. Believable? Not for a second. According to Heffernan, the board pressured him to approve these absurd expenses, but he refused, and it gets even messier. Then he even urged Dan to drop the $200,000 a month mansion, warning that throwing massive pool parties during COVID lockdowns wasn't just irresponsible, also it was flat out illegal. But this next twist? Game-changing. Instead of listening, Dan crowned himself chairman of the board and announced he'd throw more pool parties and keep the mansion starting immediately. It wasn't a strategy, it was a taunt to reality. And that kind of arrogance, it was the beginning of the end.
I mean, all this stuff just kind of like ran the company's value down. And then once the company's value goes down, it's hard for them to raise it, so it's the whole thing. It had been, 39 years or whatever since he set up the trust fund. The two stocks that he had in there just didn't do that well.
Dan's next move, it turns darker from here. Out of nowhere, he accused Curtis Heffernan of using illegal substances during a meeting, a claim with zero proof, but just enough for Ignite to cut him loose. In June 2020, the company refused to comment, while Dan smugly brushed it off in a statement to TMZ as if the matter was beneath him. But that's not all. The real damage came from within. Anonymous former Ignite employees stepped forward, backing Heffernan's story and revealing the ugly truth. The company was paying for everything. From Dan's hedonistic blowouts to slapping the Ignite logo on anything he desired, no matter how absurd, it all got greenlit if it fed the Dan Bilzerian brand. Here's where it really explodes. Every viral flex, every jaw-dropping snapshot, every moment designed to inspire envy. It was all a line item billed to Ignite and paid for by unsuspecting investors. No marketing strategy, no legitimate business purpose, just Dan's personal lifestyle wrapped in a company invoice. When critics called him out, he didn't retreat, he went on the attack. On X, he fired back. Some journalists said Ignite was funding my life, which I've been going hard for 10 years and been famous for going hard for 7. I started Ignite 2 years ago, raised $100 million, and I own the majority of the company. I suck my... It was arrogant, it was crass, and it made one thing clear, and he thought he was untouchable. The numbers didn't lie, and this part left everyone stunned. Ignite's 2020 annual report exposed a staggering $69 million loss against just $9.7 million in revenue. The stock collapsed from $2.50 to 28 cents, erasing almost 90% of its value. By October 2020, with his empire in free fall, Dan tried to spin the narrative, but then everything changed. He compared Ignite to Uber on X, boasting, "Uber is worth $80 billion. It has never had a profitable month since it started, and it lost over $5 billion in 1 quarter last year." It might have sounded smart, if not for the fact that Uber wasn't blowing $75,000 on paintball fields or renting mega mansions just to live stream drunk parties. Here's where the truth hits hard. The losses weren't even the most damning part. Dan's entire magnetism, the parties, the cars, the women, had been built on rentals and staged opulence. Heffernan's lawsuit ripped away the curtain, showing that nothing in Dan's fantasy life was actually his. And it gets even messier. Once people saw that the wealthy playboy image they'd idolized since 2014 was just a hollow marketing gimmick, the magic was gone. Overnight, the king of Instagram became nothing more than a salesman pitching his own illusion, and the empire was crumbling beneath him. All while Dan strutted around as Ignite's shiny figurehead, the drama only gets deeper. Behind the titles and the fake glamour, a silent civil war was brewing. Dan claimed he'd been unlawfully booted from the board and that his image was exploited without his consent. In his lawsuit, he demanded $50 million in damages, painting himself as the victim of a calculated scheme to wrest control of the brand away from him. But this next twist? Game-changing. The lawsuit didn't just stir legal drama, it ripped open a deeper truth about Dan's empire. The endless war between the polished illusion and the ugly reality. Between a picture-perfect public persona and the unresolved family feuds festering behind the scenes. The threat wasn't just from outsiders, the rot was spreading from within, and that's when everything unraveled. Dan Bilzerian had once lived as if he were the lead in a non-stop action blockbuster, every scene drenched in over-the-top masculine excess. But when the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, the character he'd been playing for years had to face the man he really was. Here's where the mask falls off. On the Skinny Confidential podcast, Dan finally explained why he stepped back from social media. A rare flash of honesty that peeled back the curtain on the burnout and crumbling facade he'd spent so long propping up. "I'm tired of being hated." That's when everything unraveled again. For once, the bravado slipped, and the bitter truth came through. When your fame is built on smoke and mirrors, the cost isn't just your reputation. It's a crushing isolation that no mansion, yacht, or supercar can fix. But it didn't end there. Today, Dan clings to a new dream, the so-called Sigma Society, selling men advice on how to be real, as if his own life had ever been grounded in authenticity. The irony is almost too much. Every chapter of his story has been staged, filtered, and funded with company money, surrounded by paid extras pretending to be his inner circle. Here's where the truth hits hard. Is this his redemption arc, or just the same tired performance recycled and rebranded to sell false hope to another generation of lost men? If history has taught us anything, it's this. Dan Bilzerian doesn't transform, he just changes the backdrop, and this time the audience has seen enough.